Nothing like 8 straight victories heading into the Four Nations break for the Winnipeg Jets to kick their feet up and relax until the second stretch of the season begins. Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we are just coming off the heels of the last Jets game before the Four Nations break for Winnipeg. Obviously, a couple of teams are still finishing out their schedule, but the Jets, as of right now, are about to kick their feet up for about 2-ish weeks, I would say. 14 days now. A little bit less than, no, actually 14 days for Winnipeg to play its next game. 2 weeks, and we are going to have to sit there and not watch Jets hockey, which is quite a long time, admittedly. The Four Nations face-off, hey, it's a cool idea. But if I had a choice, I'd probably just prefer the Jets hockey. So in the meantime, obviously, the Jets still had business to take care of tonight, and I want to chat about that game in just a brief moment. Before we go too much further, though, just did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, like I said, Winnipeg just kind of finished off a nice win, 4-3 against the New York Islanders, and it was a weird game, I guess, in a lot of ways. The Jets kind of walked into this one in the first 20 minutes or so, were kind of sloppy. Winnipeg wasn't great. They did create a couple of decent looks, but the Islanders seemed like they were here to, make a bit of a statement, right? They, in my mind, kind of outworked the Jets along the walls. They created more goal-scoring opportunities on the whole, and a couple of weird, fluky mistakes from Dylan Sandberg actually led to a couple of goals for the Islanders pretty quickly. But the Jets are one of those teams there where they don't always worry when they go down. They just sort of roll their sleeves up and get back to business. And that's pretty much what happened here. Winnipeg clawed one back off of a great Alex Iafallo effort. He led a 2-on-1 and just sort of outmuscled Horvat to absolutely roof one past Sorokin. And what was kind of fun was that Brad Lambert started the play at the other end and got his first assist of the season. So, welcome back for the kid. Lambert, hasn't really been playing much hockey really at any level recently, thanks to the Moose kind of being off and him currently collecting a paycheck with the Jets. So nice to see him draw in. He was kind of like, I would say what you sort of expect for a kid who hasn't played pretty recently. Couple of nice little shifts, couple of shifts where he made, maybe make some rookie mistakes, all the sort of stuff that you'll have him figure out as he gets back. Some of those skating legs underneath him, and he starts to get a little more comfortable at the NHL level. But otherwise, I think he did the necessary in this game, recorded a nice little assist, and that's really all that you want to ask of him from his first game back in several weeks. So a lot of fun there. For the Jets, though, probably not loving that they were still down 2-1 heading into the second, and the next period was where Winnipeg kind of just took over. For about a solid 25, 30 minutes, the Jets really put the pedal to the metal and just absolutely spanked the Islanders pretty badly, to the tune of 3 second-period goals. The top line kind of went off. Gabriel Velarde scoring a couple of really pretty ones, one off of a great assist from Kyle Connor. And then later, another perfect pass. I guess I would call it perfect, but it was a little bit of a busted slot pass that still felt Velarde pretty perfectly. He kind of exploits the soft coverage and absolutely roofs one for his, I believe this is actually a career high in goals. 24 already. He's over 50 points now. Very happy for him. Going to be a lot happier when he inks that next extension with the Jets. Also of note, really pretty goal from Ehlers and Perfetti. Ehlers saucing a beautiful backhand pass right along the wall, straight behind from Sorokin, and finds Ehlers coming right down the middle of the slot perfectly. Absolutely just roofs it past Sorokin. Never really had a chance. And, the Jets were up 4-2 before you could even really blink. It was very fast. But then, towards the end of the game, it sort of seemed like the Jets were like, all right, Hellebuyck, you got this, Vezina mode. And it was an absolute pelting, right? Hellebuyck really had to stand tall. He faced something like 10 shots in 2 minutes at one point. Pretty crazy. He finished the night having made like 33 or 34 saves, which is quite a bit. Amidst all of that, the Islanders did claw one back from Kyle Palmieri, but thankfully that wasn't enough to really upset the boat. So the Jets still managed to hang on. Again, probably not the happiest Picasso that you would maybe expect from Winnipeg, but it was probably one of those games where they know the break's right there. They're all probably thinking of their next vacation destinations for the most part, and they were just hoping to make it through relatively uneventfully. But, the Islanders kind of had a different plan and very nearly came close to coming away with maybe a slightly frustrating game-tying goal. Thankfully, didn't happen. The Jets survived, and Winnipeg wins this one 4-3. If we have any larger takeaways, I would just say that maybe the Jets probably are not going to love the puck management, right? That was kind of an issue at times. Sandberg and Pionk had an especially rough evening, but then had a couple of good shifts on and off after that. Just in general, I think the Jets maybe turned over the puck a few more times than they wanted, especially in the defensive zone. That was kind of where Winnipeg would occasionally get pinned pretty deep. Less so in the second period and the first half of the third period. But, the first period and the last 10 minutes or so, not as kind to Winnipeg. So, maybe some room for improvement there. It's kind of been an issue for the past, season or so, that the turnovers along the walls are really one of the few things that the Jets consistently struggle with. They don't have that many weaknesses that you can easily point to, but that is probably something that, Arniel will kind of sit down and say, hey, guys, we got to work on this going forward, especially heading into the playoffs. But otherwise, it was just one of those games where the Jets generally took care of business. Maybe they kind of let off the gas a little bit late in the game, or a lot of it in this case, but they did enough to come away with 2 points. Nice win, big 2 points. The Jets now have 39 wins on the season, which is pretty darn insane, and they get to relax now for the foreseeable next couple of weeks. Well, most of them. A couple of players will be going to the Four Nations, and we'll chat about that later, especially because Mark Scheifele might actually get the summons for Team Canada here, especially if Sidney Crosby is not ready to go, but we will chat about that in a little bit. One thing that might be of interest, though, a player who did not play in the game against the Islanders. New York was down one of their top defenders in Noah Dobson, a guy that I think the Jets probably have a modicum of interest in, and apparently he is available on the market. And I want to talk about whether this might be the play that the Jets really go all in for, or if they maybe try something else here in just a little bit. I mean, this is a really good top pairing young defender, and he could potentially transform Winnipeg's defense. So want to spend some time chatting about that in just a little bit. But before we go any further, did want to mention our friends and partners at Gametime. You're looking for tickets to the next big event, maybe like the Super Bowl or, a Winnipeg Jets game after the break, or maybe you're into concerts like I am. I go to lots of hardcore and metal shows, and I'm always looking for a good deal. Gametime is here to help. They even have a brand new feature called Gametime Picks that helps you find all of the best deals on the best seats, and they help you do it even faster than ever. It's never been easier, and rather than having to sort through thousands of tickets, they'll bring all the best stuff immediately. They'll even show you super deals on prime seats, and you can even see seat views from the venue, so you know what you're actually getting into before you hit purchase. And if you toggle all-in pricing upfront, you'll always see what you're paying without any surprise fees or hidden charges once you reach checkout. It's all up front. We all kind of love that because I don't think any of us likes getting hit with surprise fees it's a bit of a pain in the butt, right? And I've actually used Gametime last year for a championship game between Kansas City and Baltimore. It was a great experience, very seamless, couldn't be easier. And for all of you, I highly recommend that you take the guesswork out of buying tickets and go with Gametime. All you have to do is download the app, and when you do, be sure to create an account and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting a little bit about some, post-Islanders takeaways. I know that this was a game where I think a lot of folks were probably keeping a bit of a close eye on Brock Nelson. Nelson, for his part, didn't actually factor into the scoring too much, but he was pretty active, slapping the puck here and there, trying to create some good scoring opportunities. Just doing the general stuff that I think the Jets would probably appreciate. He had a couple of good, I would say, center slot high shots that got tipped on goal. Hellebuck had to make a couple of big saves, and he was also just kind of slapping from pretty tough angles, but really wasn't able to, make much of a difference on the power play, just because the Islanders' power play was actually worse than I think I've ever seen. You remember how we used to complain about the Jets' power plays before Payne took over? I actually think the Islanders might have a worse power play. So whatever Nelson scores on the power play is probably more a product of his own individual talent than whatever it is the Islanders do out there. I actually think Winnipeg was more dangerous on Islanders power plays than the Islanders power play was to the Jets PK. So yeah, Nelson, I think, is probably a guy that Winnipeg, regardless, will have interest in. I know I don't really read into much from like a one-game sample that the Jets played against. But Nelson, big body, smooth skater, soft hands. We did see some of that in this game. The guy that we didn't see, though, was Noah Dobson. And Dobson is a really big deal for the Islanders defense. One of their top pairing right-handed young D, very prime-aged, early 20s. And apparently he is on the market. Right now, he's still currently hurt, but I would imagine that he'll heal up pretty soon. And Dobson is the kind of guy that if you are taking a major swing, not only for the present and the future, this is the kind of trade where you're talking about a Perfetti-like player going back the other way. I don't necessarily mean Cole himself, but somebody of that caliber being exchanged. And apparently the Islanders have said that they would be willing to move Dobson for a higher-end scoring forward. So my take on this is very complicated because Dobson would be a linchpin for this defense and would also really address your top pairing right side for years to come. And if Dobson is your move, it does kind of make a lot of the other forward acquisitions maybe a little less consequential. This is the big chalupa. This is your swing for the fences kind of move, but it also sets you up for the long term with one of the top young defenses in the Western Conference, right? Dobson, Morrissey, and Sandberg all potentially locked up for your Jets D is absolutely unreal. And then you have DeMello there as your number 4, and you can sort of figure out the third pairing as need be. But if that's your top 4, that is a really nice group of players. And I think for the Jets, it would be a swing that's well worth taking. The thing that I kind of run into, though, is that what the Jets would have to give up, I have a hard time seeing Winnipeg really meeting that need, unless the Islanders maybe change for looking at perhaps some futures and stuff, maybe like a package of Lambert and some other stuff, some really good pieces, mind you, but maybe not an immediate high impact forward that the Jets are already trying to hold on to begin with. I don't think that there's as much of an immediate match. Now, maybe the Jets look at a Cole Perfetti and think that's a loss that we can stomach for somebody who would anchor your top pairing alongside Morrissey for the long foreseeable future. But I just don't think the Jets would assess it that way. I think Winnipeg is probably relatively happy with the defense. I think that they would prefer to go more in the depth range, or maybe a guy who's like a solid second pairing player than trying to swing for a top young D that's going to cost you probably all of the assets that you would have used to acquire more than one piece at the deadline. The other thing that's probably true is that if you trade like a Perfetti or something, you already open up another hole to have to fill, and maybe the Jets aren't as interested in doing that. Again, I would probably be okay with the trade if that's what it took. But I sort of find myself running up against the idea that the Jets will look at this and go, we don't want to have to open up a hole in one spot to fill another, right? Do they feel that that would make sense in the balance of things? I don't know. For a top young defender, I think the value is disproportionate, right? If you're giving up a Velarde or a Perfetti or something, the value of the top right-handed D spot is probably bigger. Those guys are going to eat more minutes most nights. They are really, really critical to really building the backbone and spine of your blue line. And so, I can easily talk myself into it. I don't really see a scenario where it happens. But maybe Lou changes his ask and the Jets are actually more in the ballpark. I think of the teams that could pull this off, it's probably within a reach for the Jets. It would just take a lot for it to actually happen. And that's where I kind of I feel less confident in that sort of outcome. My feeling is that the Jets would go for a Nelson type first and then maybe make a move for like a Dumoulin or somebody of that tier. I don't think that they would go for a Dobson just because the amount that they'd have to give up to bring him in might put them at a deficit elsewhere. And it's not like the Jets' wing depth is crazy either. But I mean, it is a hole that you could probably fill with other assets if you move a Perfetti or a Velarde. I just think the Jets probably don't have that much interest in it. So, it's an interesting thought, but I think for now, Winnipeg will probably look elsewhere. But in the summer, if you think that you might not be able to bring somebody back, like Velarde is maybe asking for something too crazy and you don't really see a way that you can make it work, maybe they revisit that conversation. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Velarde likes Winnipeg. I think he'll probably come back in like the $6.5 to $7 million range for 5 or 6 years. So I don't really worry about that. But man, a Dobson would be a game changer for the Jets. And it's kind of funny because I think there are many ways for Winnipeg to set itself up really nicely for the playoffs. But if you get a Dobson, you'll not only secure this run, next year's run, but for the foreseeable future, you don't have to worry about drafting a top-end elite puck mover, right? Dobson solves that immediately. He's going to be the centerpiece of your blue line alongside Morrissey and Sandberg. And, on your right side, then you can bring in Salamonson, and you don't have to throw Salo into the deep end very quickly. You've got Dobson and DeMello, maybe DeMello playing some slightly reduced minutes to account for your brand new stud young defender, and that might actually work for DeMello quite nicely. A slightly reduced role that kind of fits more as he ages out, I think would be very beneficial for him. Maybe it'll help him with some of the speed issues he's had, some of the issues under pressure where he's passed the puck maybe into some dangerous spots. And so there's a lot of reasons that I think it works for the Jets at a very high level. I kind of get hung up on the details, though, and that's where I sort of wonder what the Jets are thinking here. Would they be after a Dobson? I think pretty much everyone worth their salt would, but I just don't know if Winnipeg specifically is the team that feels it can afford to stomach the loss of a big player in exchange for a top young defender. But if ever there was a year to do it, this feels like a pretty good excuse. I'd be curious to know what trade package would even get it done. If it's just a young scoring forward, perhaps a Perfetti or a Velarde becomes more of an option. But with Winnipeg, they haven't really given like a lot of indication that they're swinging in a direction like that. I know Chevy's shopping around. They've talked about looking for some players who maybe aren't immediately being discussed as available on the market. But if Dobson really is out there and is an option, the Jets would probably at least be wise to ask what Winnipeg could potentially offer in exchange that they would be happy with. But for now, I've mostly put that more in the would love it, not expecting anything to really come out of it. I think too much would have to happen for the Jets to really make that deal a possibility. And, as much as it would be sick and I'd support it, I don't think Winnipeg will feel it can stomach the loss of assets that you probably have to make happen in order for that deal to come to fruition. But curious to know what your read on that is. Do you think the Jets would go for it? Do you think that Dobson's achievable? Would you prioritize that over a Nelson and a more depth-level defender? Or do you feel that this approach where you bring in multiple pieces rather than one big one and maybe one small one is the better approach? I don't know that there's a right answer for me. I kind of feel like I'd go with the multiple modest to bigger pieces, just because I feel like that impacts more spots on the roster that can kind of tip the balance. But, again, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer here. So let me know your thoughts on that, if you would go for Dobson or if you think the Jets should just kind of stay the course with their current seemingly approach. But we'll kind of keep an eye on that, monitor it, and see if the Jets maybe, win some hearts and minds and go for the big enchilada. But again, I don't anticipate it. But amidst all of this, of course, the Jets are going to have a couple of weeks to figure out, what they want at the trade deadline, whether a Dobson is somebody worth pursuing. And before all of that, before they even arrive to a decision on all of this, they've still got the Four Nations tournament. And we might actually have another representative going there with some injuries that have popped up amongst the current rosters. And we'll chat about why Scheifele might be making Team Canada in just a brief moment. Hey, friends, and welcome back to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's closing thoughts from this episode as we're just chatting a little bit about the Four Nations tournament. I know some of you are probably going to watch it. I will try and keep up and probably do some reports from the Team Canada and Team USA games. Less invested personally in some of the other ones just because we don't really have any Jets playing for those teams, and so my own personal care for readouts on those squads is relatively low. But if you want me to chat about Finland and Sweden, I'd be happy to do so. A little less familiar with their current rosters other than a few obvious names. But Team Canada, Team USA, that's where we're going to see some really big Jet stars take the stage. And Team Canada might be adding Mark Scheifele if Crosby isn't ready to go. Sydney was held out from tonight's game, and if he's not good to go for Team Canada, then the Jets might be sending Scheifele instead. Mark got snubbed initially, and then after that proceeded to move into one of the top goal-scoring races in the league with, Kyle Connor right at his side. And so I think, at the start of the year, Scheifele was more of a reserves option. But since he's really lit it up the past couple of months and has looked more like the player that we saw several years ago, he might actually prove himself valuable enough to Team Canada to get a nod. I think with his recent scoring streak and how productive he's been, I feel like it's just a matter of time before that announcement is made. But maybe there's a shocker. Maybe he doesn't get the call, and instead, Team Canada goes elsewhere, or Crosby just stays. I just feel like Scheifele is too good for them to not call up. I would actually think it's almost a certainty, especially if Crosby is even remotely a doubt. Scheifele really is one of your best options, and maybe we can kind of spark some of that old joy that we used to have with Team North America. You remember McDavid and Scheifele and all those guys all playing together, Gaudreau and Parayko. That team was so much fun. Obviously, you don't have quite that composite roster since that was Team North America and not Team Canada. But hey, maybe we can rekindle some of the vibes, and Scheifele does really deserve a look after he's just been on fire the past couple of weeks. Morrissey already is, going himself, so good to have that locked down. But I believe Josh Morrissey is going. I don't want to get that one wrong. Yeah. He'll be on that blue line. So Morrissey, joining Kyle Connor and Connor Hellebuck already as some of our reps. If we have four guys there, I think that's pretty impressive. Scheifele and Connor have been, near the front of the pack for goal scoring and points recently. Morrissey, of course, the steady Eddie on the blue line, who's always so active and so fun to watch. And Hellebuck in net for Team USA, man. If he happens to add a Team USA trophy, current situation politically notwithstanding, it'd be pretty cool. I think Hellebuck of many of the players there really deserves some true international recognition. And if people still aren't familiar with this game, they're going to be by the end of this tournament, man. He is playing at a level right now that not many goalies could ever dream of, especially with, respect to the overall league save percentage being at like, on average, it's supposed to be like around a 903 or something, and he's at like a 925 this year. So incredible performance from him. Very much a lock for the Vezina at this point, barring some shocker, and clearly one of the most important players to the Jets' success this year, and really to the franchise history. So it will be cool to see all of these guys lace up for their respective nations. Would have been kind of fun if we had Patrick Laine still. He would have gone for Team Finland, I'm sure. But we'll have to just, dream about that one day. It is kind of funny. Like, the Jets used to be this team that drafted so many Swedish and Finnish kids, and they do still draft some of the Swedes, but you don't really see as many of the Finnish players, especially guys that are at like the higher levels. Heinola may have been one of our last likely candidates to really crack the squad, and he hasn't really had enough of an NHL career to make a case for that. So unfortunately, he's not going to be going. It would have been nice if at this stage he'd proved to be a reliable enough option, but the Jets have had other plans. So it is what it is, but I don't know if you'll be watching the tournament. Let me know who you're rooting for and what you're hoping to see. Are you hoping for any particular players to stand out? Are you expecting some big upsets? Drop your predictions for the Four Nations tournament below. I think for me, Canada will probably go through this one and win. I know that they maybe had some World Juniors disappointments, but I don't expect that to happen with the senior team. So I think Team Canada's got a pretty good shot. Team USA will be tough, though. Having to shoot against Hellebuck is going to be a really tough assignment, even for an all-star, super stacked cast like Team Canada will have. So excited to see that play out. It is maybe not the replacement for Jets hockey that I would prefer right now. I think we'd all probably like to watch Winnipeg just keep whooping on some mediocre and bad teams and play competitively against top teams, but this will have to do, especially in light of the Olympics still being a bit of a ways away. But as a teaser and I guess a cash grab for the NHL, I can't complain too much. I'll tune in, have some game recaps, and cover all of that. But I'm sure in between, there's going to be rumors about Jets contracts, Jets trades, and we'll be sure to cover that over the next couple of weeks as that news drops. But let me know if there's any other topics you want me to cover over the next 2 weeks, as we are going to be on a little bit of a pause with the Jets. I will do my best to chat about them, probably do some fan polls here, and maybe rate what we think of the season so far. All of that on future episodes over the next 2 weeks. But for tonight's show, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening and making Locked On Winnipeg Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here next week with more Jets coverage. So see you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.